The morning light filtered through the grand windows of our estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors. I stood frozen in the hallway, my fingertips pressed against the cold wall for support as I listened to my husband's voice drift from his study. The deep timbre of his words was warm, affectionate, a tone he rarely used with me anymore. "I can't wait to see you tonight," he murmured. "Yes, she'll be at her charity meeting until late. You know how she gets about those things, meaningless distractions." My stomach clenched. After 12 years of marriage, I should have been immune to the pain of Julian's casual cruelty, but each discovery still cut like a fresh wound. I forced myself to breathe, to stay perfectly still as he continued his conversation with whoever waited on the other end of the line. His mistress, his latest infatuation, another woman who believed his lies. I was Alina Winters, wife of Julian Winters, one of the most respected real estate developers in the city. To the outside world, we were the picture of success, the power couple who had it all. The sprawling estate we lived in had been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandmother to my mother, and then to me. It was my heritage, my legacy, the one thing I had brought into our marriage that was truly mine. Or so I had thought. "Alina, we need to talk." Julian's voice was unusually serious as he walked into the living room 3 days later, briefcase in hand, his tailored suit still immaculate despite the late hour. I looked up from my book, a strange sense of foreboding washing over me. "What is it?" He sat across from me, maintaining a careful distance. His dark eyes, the ones that had once captivated me with their intensity, were cold, calculating. "I've made some changes to our financial arrangements. The estate has been sold." The words didn't register at first. "What do you mean, sold?" "I mean exactly what I said. The estate has been transferred to Olivia Parker." My book slipped from my fingers. "Your assistant. You sold my family home to your assistant." Julian shrugged, as if we were discussing something as trivial as a change in dinner plans. "It was a business decision, Alina. You've never had a head for these things." "A business decision?" My voice was barely a whisper. "This estate has been in my family for 3 generations. You had no right." "I had every right," he cut in sharply. "If you'd bothered to read the documents you signed last year, you would know that you gave me power of attorney over all your assets." The memory came flooding back, Julian pushing papers across his desk, his voice soothing as he explained they were just routine updates to our financial portfolio. I had trusted him completely. "But why Olivia?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. A smirk played at the corners of his mouth. "She understands investment opportunities. Unlike you, she appreciates what I'm building." In that moment, I saw Julian clearly for perhaps the first time in our marriage. The handsome, ambitious man I had fallen in love with had always been a facade, hiding someone far more sinister beneath. "When do we have to leave?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded despite the hurricane raging inside me. Julian stood, straightening his already perfect suit. "You have 2 weeks. I'll be staying at the penthouse until then. Best to give you space to adjust." After he left, I sat motionless for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. My entire world had collapsed, and I hadn't even seen it coming. The numbness gave way to pain, and finally, as the first light of dawn crept across the sky, to something else entirely, a cold, crystalline anger that brought with it a startling clarity. If Julian thought I would simply fade away, he was about to learn how deeply he had miscalculated. "He did what?" Sarah leaned forward across the cafe table, her coffee forgotten as she processed what I'd just told her. Sarah Collins had been my friend since college, long before I met Julian. She was now a family law attorney with a reputation for being relentless when it came to protecting her clients. Her red hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her expression one of professional outrage mixed with personal concern. "He transferred the estate to his assistant," I repeated, my voice steadier than it had been yesterday. "Apparently, I signed over power of attorney to him last year." Sarah frowned. "That's unusual. Alina, do you have a copy of what you signed?" I shook my head. Julian handled all the paperwork. He always said I shouldn't worry about the financial details. "And now we know why," Sarah muttered. She took a sip of her coffee, her mind visibly working. "Listen, I don't want to alarm you, but this isn't just a bad husband being a jerk. This could be fraud." "Fraud," the word felt foreign on my tongue. "Yes, if he had you sign documents without fully explaining what they were, especially something as significant as power of attorney." "Alina," I'd like you to meet with a colleague of mine who specializes in financial fraud. Her name is Megan Reynolds." Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing, flickered to life inside me. "Do you think there's something I can do?" Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I think Julian Winters has made a critical mistake, and I think it's time he learned that you're not as helpless as he believes." Megan Reynolds's office was minimalist and efficient, much like the woman herself. She listened silently as I recounted my story, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "Mrs. Winters," she said when I had finished, "I believe you may have grounds for both a civil suit and potentially criminal charges against your husband." My heart raced. What would that involve? "First, we need evidence. Concrete proof of his deception and financial manipulation. We'll need access to your financial records, any communication between your husband and his assistant, and documentation of the estate transfer. Julian keeps everything locked down. He's careful." Megan smiled, a sharp expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everyone makes mistakes, Mrs. Winters, even careful men, especially when they're confident they won't be caught." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small phone. "This is a prepaid phone, untraceable. I want you to keep it hidden. We'll use it to communicate securely." I took the phone, suddenly feeling as though I had stepped into another life, one filled with burner phones and covert operations. What else? "Act normal," Megan advised. "Don't let Julian suspect anything. Meanwhile, I'll be working with Sarah to gather evidence. Also, if possible, try to find those power of attorney documents. They could be crucial." As I left her office, clutching the burner phone in my pocket, I felt a strange sense of empowerment replacing the helplessness of the past few days. Julian had underestimated me, dismissed me as insignificant. That would be his downfall. 3 days later, as Julian was out at a business dinner, I found myself searching his home office. My hands trembled slightly as I carefully sifted through his files, making sure to return everything exactly as I found it. Julian was meticulous. He would notice if anything was out of place. Behind a row of business books on his shelf, I discovered a hidden safe. Of course, I didn't know the combination, another secret Julian had kept to himself. I was about to give up when my eyes fell on his briefcase, left uncharacteristically open on his desk. Inside was a manila folder labeled simply, "Divorce." My blood ran cold as I carefully pulled out the document. Divorce papers already drawn up, waiting only for my signature. According to the terms outlined, I would walk away with nothing. No alimony, no property, not even my personal belongings. Julian had planned this, orchestrated my complete financial destruction. But what truly made my heart stop was the date on the papers. They had been prepared 6 months ago, long before he'd transferred the estate to Olivia. This hadn't been a recent decision. He had been planning to discard me for at least half a year. I took photos of every page with the burner phone Megan had given me, then carefully returned everything to its place. As I closed the briefcase, something else caught my eye, a small notepad with figures and calculations. Insurance policy, my name, a substantial death benefit. The room seemed to tilt as the full implications hit me. Julian wasn't just planning to divorce me and leave me destitute. There was another option he was considering, one that would be far more profitable for him. My hands shaking now for an entirely different reason, I photographed these notes as well before slipping out of the office, my mind racing with the horrifying knowledge that my husband might be plotting my death. "He's going to kill me," I whispered, sitting across from Sarah and Megan in a quiet corner of a park far from my neighborhood. We had chosen the location for its anonymity, a place Julian would never visit. Sarah's face paled. "Alina, are you certain? That's a serious accusation." I showed them the photos I'd taken. "Look at these calculations. This is the death benefit from a life insurance policy I didn't even know existed. And here," I pointed to a notation in Julian's distinctive handwriting, "he's calculated how much more he would get if I died versus if we divorced." Megan studied the photos with a grim expression. "This is concerning, certainly, but not definitive proof of intent to murder. We need more." "What about the assistant?" Sarah suggested. "Olivia Parker, she's at the center of this. If Julian transferred the estate to her, she must know something." "She's sleeping with him," I said flatly. "Why would she help me?" Megan and Sarah exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Let me look into Olivia Parker," Megan said finally. Everyone has motivations beyond the obvious. For now, continue as normal with Julian. Document everything, but do not confront him. As we parted ways, Sarah hugged me tightly. Be careful, Alina. If you ever feel you're in immediate danger, don't hesitate. Just leave. We can protect your legal interests later. I nodded, but inside, a cold resolution was forming. I wouldn't run. Julian had taken everything from me, my home, my security, my future. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of taking my dignity as well. The message from Megan came 2 days later. Meet OP at Westside Cafe, 2 p.m. Come alone. My heart pounded as I entered the cafe, scanning the room until I spotted her. Olivia Parker, sitting alone at a corner table, her back to the wall. She was younger than I had imagined, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that watched me approach with careful assessment. Mrs. Winters, she said as I sat down across from her, thank you for coming. I'm surprised you wanted to meet, I replied, studying the woman who was now, apparently, the owner of my family home and my husband's mistress. Olivia's mouth tightened. There are things you need to know, things about Julian that would be unwise to discuss over the phone. A waitress approached, and we both ordered coffee, waiting in tense silence until she left. I'm not sleeping with your husband, Olivia said abruptly once we were alone. That's what you believe, isn't it? It's what he wants everyone to believe. I stared at her, caught off guard. Then why? Why did he transfer the estate to me? She leaned forward. Because I'm not who Julian thinks I am. My real name is Olivia Parker, but there's something Julian doesn't know. Diane Matthews was my aunt. The name hit me like a physical blow. Diane, my closest friend from childhood until Julian had systematically cut her from my life, claiming she was a negative influence. Diane died 3 years ago, Olivia continued. But before she did, she told me about you, about how Julian isolated you from everyone who cared about you. When I saw the opening for the assistant position with Julian Winters, I took it. I wanted to understand what kind of man could do that to someone. My mind was reeling. So you've been, what, spying on him? Olivia nodded. At first, I just wanted to know who he really was. Then I started noticing discrepancies in his business dealings. The way he manipulated finances, moved money through shell companies. When he approached me with the estate transfer, claiming it was a temporary measure for tax purposes, I played along. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Everything is here. Recordings of conversations, financial records, emails, including discussions about the insurance policy on your life. My hand trembled as I took the flash drive. Why are you giving me this? Olivia's eyes hardened. Because Julian Winters destroyed my aunt's life, and now he's trying to destroy yours. And because, she hesitated, he's planning to move forward soon. There's a dinner party at the Thompson estate this weekend. Julian has invited several business associates, and I overheard him talking to someone about making sure you have an accident after the party. Cold fear washed over me. You're saying he's going to kill me this weekend. I'm saying he's setting the stage, creating witnesses who will remember you being unstable, drinking too much. He's been laying groundwork, telling people you've been depressed, erratic. Olivia's gaze was steady. Mrs. Winters, Alina, you need to act before he does. As I left the cafe, clutching the flash drive in my pocket, I realized that the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine anymore. It was about survival. Sarah and Megan were stunned by Olivia's revelations. This changes everything, Sarah said as we reviewed the contents of the flash drive in Megan's office. With this evidence, we can not only invalidate the estate transfer but potentially bring criminal charges against Julian. But we need to move carefully, Megan cautioned. Julian is clearly dangerous and well-connected. If he suspects we're building a case against him, he might accelerate his plans. I thought about the dinner party, now just 3 days away. What if we use the party to our advantage? Julian thinks it's his stage to set me up. What if we turn it into our opportunity to gather even more evidence? Megan looked skeptical. That's extremely risky, Alina. So is doing nothing while my husband plots my murder, I countered. Olivia will be there, she can help. After much discussion, we developed a plan. Olivia would wear a recording device. I would play my part, the oblivious, soon-to-be-discarded wife, while carefully documenting any incriminating statements Julian might make. Meanwhile, Megan would expedite the preparation of legal documents, a divorce filing that included all our evidence of Julian's fraud, along with a request for emergency protective orders based on the threat to my life. The moment the dinner party ends, we file everything, Sarah explained. Julian won't have time to react before the courts are involved. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. And I'll be moved out before he returns from the party, somewhere he can't find me. Sarah squeezed my hand. Alina, are you sure about this? It's not too late to simply leave, file for divorce from a safe distance. I thought about my family home, about the years I had given to Julian, about the calculated way he had planned to strip me of everything, including my life. I'm sure, I said quietly. Julian believes I'm weak, controllable. It's time he learned how wrong he's been. The night of the Thompson dinner party arrived, crisp and clear. I dressed with particular care, choosing an elegant black dress that Julian had always approved of. As I fastened my grandmother's pearls around my neck, I caught sight of my reflection, a woman I barely recognized, with determination burning behind her eyes. Julian barely glanced at me as we rode to the party in silence. In his mind, I was already a problem nearly solved, an inconvenience soon to be permanently eliminated. The Thompson estate was alight with lanterns and candles, the wealthy and powerful of our social circle mingling over champagne and careful conversation. I played my part perfectly, the devoted wife, slightly fragile, perhaps drinking a bit too much, though in reality, I switched my champagne for water when no one was looking. Julian was in his element, charming and commanding, occasionally shooting me concerned glances that were entirely for the benefit of his audience. I caught him whispering to Gregory Thompson, who then looked at me with what appeared to be pity. Setting the stage, just as Olivia had warned. Midway through the evening, I excused myself to the powder room. Olivia intercepted me in the hallway, her expression tense. He's been talking to Thompson about investing in a new development, she whispered. But he mentioned that he's worried about your mental state affecting his business decisions. He said you've been unpredictable lately. I nodded unsurprised. Keep recording. I'm going to give him an opportunity to say more. When I returned to the party, I deliberately sought out Julian's business associates, engaging them in conversation about the estate, my family estate, and how much it meant to me. I could see Julian watching, his jaw tightening as I mentioned my plans for renovations. Finally, he approached, placing a possessive hand on my arm. Alina, darling, you seem tired. Perhaps we should leave soon. The concern in his voice was perfect, convincing to everyone except me. I recognized the cold calculation in his eyes. Actually, I was just telling Martin about my grandmother's estate, I said, my voice steady. You know, the property that's been in my family for generations. Julian's fingers dug into my arm. Alina has such sentimental attachments, he told Martin with a fond smile that didn't reach his eyes. But sometimes practical considerations must take precedence. What practical considerations justified transferring my family home to your assistant? I asked innocently, watching his face freeze. Martin looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. I think I'll get another drink, he murmured, moving away. Julian leaned close, his voice a threatening whisper. What are you doing? I smiled, feeling a surge of power at his momentary loss of control. Just making conversation, Julian. Isn't that what these parties are for? His eyes narrowed. We'll discuss this at home. Will we? I maintained my smile. Or will you be staying at Olivia's tonight, in what used to be my bedroom? For a moment, raw anger flashed across his face before he mastered it. You've had too much to drink, he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. I think it's time we left. You go ahead, I replied. I'll find my own way home. It was a calculated risk. Julian wouldn't make a scene here, surrounded by his peers, and my refusal to leave with him disrupted whatever plan he might have had for after the party. The look he gave me was chilling, a promise of retribution. But he simply nodded stiffly and turned away, immediately engaging another guest in conversation as if our exchange had never happened. I caught Olivia's eye across the room. She gave me an imperceptible nod. Phase 1 was complete. Julian had shown his true colors, however briefly, and it was all recorded. Now came the more challenging part of our plan. While Julian mingled at the party, a team organized by Megan was moving my personal belongings to a secure location. Not everything, That would be too obvious, but enough that I would have what I needed for the next few weeks. By the time Julian returned home, I would be gone, and the legal machinery would be in motion. I left the party separately, as promised, with Sarah waiting a block away to drive me to the safe house they had arranged. As we drove, she updated me on our progress. The filing is ready. Megan will submit everything electronically at midnight. By morning, Julian will be served with divorce papers, financial fraud allegations, and a restraining order based on the threat to your safety. I stared out the window at the passing city lights. What if it's not enough? Julian has connections, money. He does, Sarah acknowledged. But we have evidence, and tomorrow when he tries to contact you and can't, when he's suddenly facing legal action on multiple fronts, he'll be off balance. That's when people like Julian make mistakes. She was right. Julian's arrogance was his weakness. He believed himself untouchable, believed that I was too weak and dependent to stand against him. That blindness was our advantage. That night in the small but secure apartment Megan had arranged, I barely slept. Images of Julian's face, first charming, then calculating, finally furious, played in my mind. I had lived with this man for 12 years, trusted him completely, and never truly known him at all. By morning, everything would change. The carefully constructed life Julian had built would begin to unravel, and he would know, finally, that I was the one pulling the threads. The call came at 8:17 a.m., Julian's name flashing on my burner phone. Sarah and Megan, who had arrived early to prep me for what was coming, both nodded encouragingly. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Julian." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "I assume you've been served the divorce papers," I said calmly. "Divorce papers, try fraud allegations, restraining orders, and a freeze on our accounts. Have you lost your mind?" I could picture him packing in his office, his perfect composure shattered. "No, Julian, I've finally found it, along with the evidence of what you've been planning." A beat of silence. "What are you talking about?" "The power of attorney documents I supposedly signed, the estate transfer to Olivia, the insurance policy, the notes calculating how much you'd benefit from my death compared to a divorce. Should I continue?" Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming softer, reasonable, the voice he had used to manipulate me for years. "Alina, you're confused. Whatever you think you found has been misinterpreted. Let's meet and talk about this rationally. I can explain everything. Like you explained the divorce papers you prepared 6 months ago, or how you explained to Gregory Thompson that I've been mentally unstable lately. No, Julian, we'll talk through our lawyers from now on." "You're making a terrible mistake," he said, the reasonable tone giving way to something darker. "You have no idea what you're up against." "Actually, I do. For the first time, I see you clearly, and so will everyone else." I ended the call as he was mid-sentence, a small act of defiance that felt immensely satisfying. Sarah grinned. "That was perfect, he's rattled." Megan was already on her phone, confirming that all our filings had been properly received and processed. "The judge has granted the temporary restraining order and the freeze on the joint accounts," she reported. "The fraud investigation will take longer, but we've laid the groundwork." I took a deep breath. "What now?" "Now we prepare for court," Sarah said. "Julian will fight back hard. He'll have his own legal team. He'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive." "But we have the evidence," I reminded her. Megan nodded. "Yes, and we have something else he doesn't expect, Olivia's testimony." The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers. Julian, as expected, assembled an aggressive defense team who filed counter motions challenging every aspect of our case. He claimed the evidence was fabricated, that I was mentally unwell, that I had misunderstood common financial planning as something sinister. But Megan and Sarah had anticipated every move. For each accusation Julian made, they had documentation ready to refute it. The power of attorney document, when examined by experts, showed signs of forgery. The financial records revealed systematic fraud. And Julian's own notes, coupled with Olivia's testimony, painted a damning picture of his intentions toward me. Through it all, Julian maintained his public persona, the successful businessman unfairly targeted by a bitter wife. He gave carefully worded statements to mutual friends, expressing concern for my mental health while portraying himself as the victim of my irrational vengeance. Some believed him. Others, seeing the mounting evidence, began to distance themselves. The empire Julian had built on charm and intimidation was showing cracks. Then came the preliminary hearing, the first time I would face Julian in person since the night of the Thompson party. Sarah had prepared me extensively, warning that Julian's lawyers would try to provoke an emotional reaction to support their narrative of my instability. The courtroom was austere and intimidating, but I entered with my head high, avoiding looking at Julian until I was seated at our table. When I finally allowed myself to glance his way, I was struck by the change in him. The confident, commanding presence had diminished. He looked tired, his customary perfect appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Our eyes met briefly. In his, I saw something I had never witnessed before: uncertainty. In that moment, I knew we had already won a significant victory. Julian Winters was afraid. The hearing proceeded methodically, with both legal teams presenting their initial arguments and evidence. Julian's lawyers painted me as a vindictive woman inventing wild accusations to punish a husband who had simply fallen out of love. Our team countered with hard evidence of financial manipulation and the testimony of financial experts who had reviewed Julian's records. The turning point came when Olivia Parker was called to testify. Julian visibly stiffened as she took the stand, his confidence giving way to barely concealed panic. Olivia was composed and articulate as she detailed her role in Julian's schemes, first as an unwitting participant, then as someone gathering evidence of his fraud. She explained her connection to my old friend Diane, described the conversations she had recorded, and confirmed that Julian had explicitly discussed ways to resolve the Alina situation permanently. As she spoke, I watched Julian's face. The mask of calm control slipped, revealing glimpses of the ruthless, calculating man beneath, the real Julian Winters exposed at last. When the judge called a recess, Julian's lawyers immediately huddled with him in urgent conversation. They emerged from their conference looking grim. Sarah leaned close to whisper, "They're going to try to make a deal. They know how this looks." Sure enough, Julian's lead attorney approached Megan moments later, requesting a private discussion. They disappeared into a conference room while Sarah and I waited, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Megan returned 20 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral until we were alone. "They're offering a settlement," she said. "Julian will retransfer the estate to you, provide a substantial financial settlement, and agree to drop all counter-allegations." "In exchange for what?" I asked, suspicious of anything coming from Julian. "In exchange for dropping the criminal allegations and keeping the details of the case sealed." Sarah frowned. "He's trying to buy his way out of potential criminal charges." I considered the offer, thinking about the weeks of legal battles ahead, the public exposure, the emotional toll. Then I thought about Julian's face when Olivia was testifying, not remorseful, but afraid of being caught. "No," I said firmly. "I won't let him buy his way out of this. He was willing to take everything from me, my home, my financial security, even my life. I want the full legal process, whatever it takes." Megan smiled, a rare show of emotion. "I was hoping you'd say that, because their offer tells us something important. They're scared, and they should be." The full hearing began a week later. Over 3 grueling days, both sides presented their complete cases. Julian's team fought desperately, trying every tactic to discredit me and the evidence. But the documentation was too thorough, the testimony too compelling. On the final day, as we awaited the judge's ruling, Julian approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. His lawyers had advised against any direct contact, but Julian had always believed himself above such restrictions. "Alina," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual confidence, "it's not too late to stop this." I looked at him, this man I had once loved, who had planned my destruction with such cold precision, and felt nothing but a calm certainty. "It was too late the moment you decided I was disposable, Julian." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. Before he could respond, the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and decisive. The evidence of financial fraud was deemed substantial and compelling. The estate transfer was invalidated on grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. The prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause was triggered, entitling me to a significant portion of our marital assets. Most importantly, the judge referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation, citing disturbing evidence of intent to cause harm. As the ruling was read, I watched Julian. The composed facade finally crumbled completely, replaced by the look of a man seeing his carefully constructed world collapse around him. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, hungry for details of the sensational case. Sarah guided me past them with a protective arm around my shoulders. "It's over," she said as we reached the car. "You won." But it wasn't quite over. The criminal investigation would take months. Julian would face charges for financial fraud, at minimum, with the possibility of conspiracy to commit murder still under review. Yet as we drove away from the courthouse, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had faced my worst fears, confronted the man who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, and emerged stronger. The estate was mine again. My future, uncertain as it might be, was my own to shape. 1 year later, the afternoon sun streamed through the newly renovated windows of the estate, warming the gathering room where 24 women sat in a circle, sharing their stories. Some had escaped abusive relationships, others were rebuilding after financial devastation, all were finding their way back to themselves. The Diane Matthews Center for Women's Empowerment had been operating for 6 months now, transforming my family estate from a site of painful memories into a place of healing and strength. Sarah served on the board of directors, providing legal guidance to women who needed it, while Megan offered financial literacy workshops. As I listened to the women's stories, I thought about the path that had brought me here. Julian was serving a 15-year sentence for fraud and conspiracy, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The evidence Olivia and I had gathered had proven irrefutable, and in the face of it, even Julian's expensive legal team couldn't save him. Olivia, now the center's program director, caught my eye from across the room and smiled. Our unlikely alliance had evolved into a genuine friendship, bonded by shared purpose and the memory of Diane. When the session ended, I walked through the gardens alone, remembering how close I had come to losing everything. The estate, with its generations of history, had nearly slipped from my grasp. My very life had hung in the balance, threatened by a man who had vowed to love and protect me. Yet here I stood, stronger than I had ever been. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead forced me to discover a resilience I never knew I possessed. As the sun began to set over the grounds, I made a silent promise to my grandmother, whose portrait now hung in the center's main hall. This place would never again be used to diminish or control. It would stand as a testament to reclamation, to women who refused to be erased. Julian had wanted to write me out of existence. Instead, he had inadvertently helped me find my voice, and now that voice was helping others find theirs. That, I decided, was the most complete form of justice I could have wished for.